She took a bullet to save him. Now she wakes to find the billionaire who lost everything waiting by her bedside, ready to give up his world just to keep her alive. The rain that night wasn't kind. It came in sheets, wild and relentless, thrashing against the cracked windows of Lina's flower haven, a small, fading shop wedged between a pawn store and a bakery that smelled of burnt bread. The neon open sign flickered like it, too, was trying to survive the storm. Lina pressed her forehead against the cool glass door, watching as the street outside turned to rivers. She should have closed an hour ago, but a delivery truck was delayed, and she needed every last bouquet sold to pay her landlord tomorrow. Her fingers were sore from tying ribbons, her apron damp, her heart tired, but she smiled anyway. Flowers were the one thing that still made sense in her life. They bloomed even in darkness. She flipped the sign to closed and reached for her umbrella. The wind howled like it had a grudge against the world, bending the metal frame until it almost snapped. Lina sighed, locking the door behind her and stepping into the storm. The alley that led to her apartment was narrow and unlit. Rainwater splashed up to her knees, and her boots squeaked with every step. The scent of wet earth and engine oil filled the air. Then she heard it, a sound low, rough, like someone choking. Lina froze, clutching her umbrella tighter. Her heart thudded hard at her chest. She turned slowly toward the sound. It came from behind a dumpster near the far end of the alley. Lightning flashed. For a heartbeat, the world went white. And in that blink, she saw him. A man. He was slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. His suit, what was left of it, was torn, soaked, and streaked with dirt. His hair clung to his forehead, his skin pale beneath the rain. "Oh my God," Lina whispered. She rushed forward, knees splashing into puddles as she knelt beside him. "Sir, can you hear me?" He flinched weakly, opening his eyes just enough for her to see their color. A piercing gray, almost silver, but dimmed with pain. "Don't call anyone," he murmured, voice rasping like gravel. "Please." His tone carried something that made Lina hesitate. Not arrogance, but command. The kind of authority that made you obey before you thought. "You're bleeding," she said, ignoring the order. "You need a hospital." He shook his head, grimacing. "No hospitals." Lina glanced around the dark alley, soaked and shaking. "Then where?" "You'll die out here." His breathing was ragged. "Then let me." That broke something in her. Maybe it was the way his voice cracked, or maybe it was the exhaustion in his eyes, like someone who had fought too long and finally stopped caring. Lina didn't think. She acted. "Come on," she said firmly. "You're not dying in my alley." He didn't move. So she gritted her teeth, slung his arm over her shoulder, and hauled him up. He was heavier than he looked, but she managed, step by step, heart pounding, rain biting her face, until they reached the back door of her shop. Inside, the flower shop smelled of roses, soil, and rain. She lowered him gently onto the worn-out couch in her tiny storeroom. He groaned as she peeled back his jacket and found a deep gash near his ribs. "God, what happened to you?" she whispered. "No questions," he managed. "If they find me." "Who? Who's after you?" His hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His skin was ice cold, but his touch was strong, desperate. "Please," he said again, eyes locking with hers. "You don't understand. Don't call anyone. Promise me." The air between them thickened. For a moment, Lina felt like she'd stepped into a story that wasn't hers. A story where people vanished, secrets killed, and danger breathed through the cracks in the night. But she couldn't turn away. She swallowed hard. "Fine, I won't call anyone, but you let me help." He let go of her wrist, the tension in his shoulders easing just enough for her to grab her first aid kit. Her hands trembled as she cleaned the wound. Each hiss of pain from him sent a strange pang through her chest. "Hold still," she murmured. "This might sting." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Everything already does." His words hung in the air, soft and broken. When she finished bandaging him, he sagged against the couch, exhausted. The storm outside raged harder, thunder shaking the window panes. Lina draped her old blanket over him and stood back, watching him breathe. There was something about him, his sharp jawline, his expensive watch, the faint scar running along his throat, that didn't fit with a man bleeding in an alley. "Who are you?" she whispered. But he was already asleep. She sighed, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. She should have been afraid, really afraid, but instead, all she felt was an uneasy pull like the moment before a storm breaks. Lina turned off the light and lay down on the floor nearby, too weary to sleep, too tired to think. Every time thunder rolled, she glanced toward the couch, making sure he was still breathing. Hours passed. The rain softened. The city's chaos quieted. Just before dawn, she drifted off, dreaming of gray eyes and blood on her hands. When morning light slipped through the blinds, the couch was empty, the blanket folded neatly, and on the small table beside it, she found a note, written in elegant, slanted handwriting. "You saved my life. Don't tell anyone you saw me. A.M." Beneath the note lay a single black credit card, sleek and unfamiliar. Lina stared at it, the sound of her heartbeat louder than the rain outside. Whoever that man was, he wasn't just some stranger. He was someone dangerous, someone powerful, and somehow, she knew, this wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. Welcome my beautiful family and friends to my YouTube channel. Please click on subscribe, like, share, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, back to the story. Morning came softly, like the world had forgotten how to breathe. Lina stirred awake to the faint hum of traffic outside, the smell of rain still clinging to the air. Her back ached from sleeping on the floor, her mind foggy with dreams of gray eyes and thunder. For a moment, she couldn't remember why she'd fallen asleep beside the couch. Then her gaze shot up. Empty. The couch was empty. Her heart stumbled. The blanket she'd used to cover the stranger was folded with careful precision, as if he'd never been there at all. "Hello," she called, her voice too loud in the small shop. No answer. The silence felt wrong. Heavy, like the air itself was holding a secret. She hurried toward the back door, half expecting to see footprints in the damp floor or a trace of blood. Nothing. Just the faint scent of cologne, subtle, expensive, unfamiliar, and the soft hum of the refrigerator. That's when she saw it. A single note, resting on her counter beside an empty teacup. "You saved my life. Don't tell anyone you saw me. A.M." Lina read it twice, her fingers trembling slightly. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, like someone who'd been trained to never make mistakes. "A.M.," she murmured. The initials felt like a code, or maybe a warning. She glanced toward the shelf, where she'd placed her small emergency purse. Still there. Her phone, wallet, everything untouched. He hadn't stolen anything. So who was he? Lina's gaze drifted to the couch again. The faint impression of his head, still visible on the cushion, a spot of dried blood on the armrest. She felt a strange ache in her chest. Relief that he'd survived mixed with unease that he'd vanished without a word. Something about it didn't feel random. She spent the morning cleaning, trying to convince herself that it was over, that she'd simply helped a stranger who didn't want to be found. But the thought refused to let her go. Every time she looked at the note, the elegant A.M. seemed to pulse with meaning. By noon, the storm had broken. Sunlight streamed weakly through the shop windows, glinting off petals and glass. Lina arranged a bouquet for a customer, her movements slow, distracted. That's when her old radio crackled to life behind the counter. Breaking news from Channel 7. The announcer's voice echoed. Billionaire heir Adrian Moore, missing for 48 hours following an armed attack outside his private estate. The bouquet slipped from her hands. The stems hit the floor, scattering petals like fragments of a dream. She stood frozen, her eyes wide as the voice continued. Authorities report that Adrian Moore, son of late magnate Charles Moore, disappeared after an ambush believed to involve corporate espionage. His security convoy was found abandoned on Route 16. Blood was discovered at the scene. Blood. Her hands trembled. Adrian Moore, she whispered, replaying the initials in her mind. A.M. The room tilted slightly as everything connected in one heart-stopping instant. The man she'd found bleeding in the alley wasn't just a stranger. He was him. The missing billionaire everyone was searching for. She grabbed the radio, turning up the volume. Police have urged anyone with information to come forward. Moore is considered in critical danger. A substantial reward has been offered for leads to his whereabouts. Lina sank onto the stool behind the counter. Her pulse was wild. What'd she gotten herself into? The man she had bandaged, fed, and sheltered was being hunted by people powerful enough to ambush a billionaire's convoy and make him vanish. And now, she'd been the last person to see him alive. Her stomach turned. If the police traced his trail back to her shop, she'd have questions to answer. Questions she couldn't even begin to explain. And if the people who heard him found out he'd stayed here. Lina swallowed hard, her throat dry. She turned the sign on the door from open to closed again and locked it. That evening, she tried to keep herself busy, watering the flowers, wiping down tables that were already clean. But the quiet pressed in like a weight. Every creak made her flinch. Every shadow outside made her heart race. When her phone buzzed, she jumped. A text from her landlord. Rent due tomorrow. She stared at the message, unable to move. Her gaze drifted back to the note. AM. Who was Adrian Moore beyond the headlines? She knew the name, of course, everyone did. The Moore family owned half the city. Hotels, tech firms, shipping lines. Their faces filled business magazines. Their scandals whispered about on social media. But none of that matched the broken man she'd found in the rain. The man who'd looked at her with fear in his eyes and said, "They'll find me." What kind of life made a billionaire run for his? And what did he mean by they? Her mind chased questions like falling leaves in the wind, each one darker than the last. At sunset, a police car rolled slowly past the shop. Lina's breath hitched. She stood still behind the curtain, peering out. The car idled for a moment before continuing down the street, its red lights washing over the windows like a warning. She pressed her palm to her chest, forcing herself to breathe. If Adrian had left, that meant he was strong enough to walk. He made a choice, to protect her, maybe, or to keep her out of something she wasn't meant to see. But if that were true, why does she feel like she'd been marked by the moment she helped him? Her reflection in the glass stared back, pale, tired, haunted. "You're imagining things," she whispered. "He's gone. You're safe." The bell above her door jingled suddenly. Lina spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. It was just a courier, dropping off her evening supply of lilies. But when he handed her the receipt, he hesitated. "You okay, miss? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lina forced a shaky smile. "Maybe I have." He laughed uneasily, muttered something about the weather, and left. She locked the door again the moment he was gone. That night, Lina couldn't sleep. The city outside was restless, sirens in the distance, tires splashing through puddles, voices echoing from unseen corners. She sat on her couch, holding the note under the lamplight. Her eyes lingered on the final line. "Don't tell anyone you saw me." It felt less like a request and more like a prophecy. She knew she should throw the note away, destroy every trace, pretend it never happened. But she couldn't. Something about that night, about him, refused to fade. He had looked at her like she was the last bit of light in his collapsing world. And though he was gone now, the pull remained mysterious, invisible, magnetic. Somewhere out there, Adrian Moore was either running for his life or already gone. And Lina, a simple girl who sold flowers, had become the only thread tying him to the world he'd vanished from. The rain began again, soft against the windows. She closed her eyes, whispering into the dark. "Where are you, Adrian?" Outside, lightning flickered across the skyline, as if answering from far away. The first time Lina noticed the black car, it was parked across from her shop. Engine off, windows tinted so dark they swallowed the daylight. She brushed it off. Probably someone waiting for a friend, she told herself. But when she closed the shop that night, it was still there. Same car, same silence. The next morning, it was back. And that was when the unease began to grow claws. It had been a week since Adrian Moore's name had exploded across every headline, and a week since Lina had tried, and failed, to stop thinking about him. She couldn't escape it. His photo was everywhere. Magazine covers, news banners, even her customers whispered about the handsome billionaire gone missing. Every time his name was mentioned, her heart skipped, equal parts fear and something she refused to name. But now, the shadows had turned real. That morning, while arranging daisies in the front window, she caught a reflection in the glass. A man in a dark coat, standing across the street. He wasn't looking at the flowers. He was looking at her. She blinked, and he turned away. By evening, she saw him again, this time on the corner, pretending to check his phone. A second man lingered by the bakery. Both unfamiliar. Both watching too closely. Lina's hand shook as she pulled the blinds down. She told herself she was imagining it. Paranoia. Stress. But deep down, she knew better. Someone was watching her. That night, sleep refused to come. She kept replaying that night in the rain. His voice, his warning, his eyes full of secrets. Don't call anyone. They'll find me. What if they weren't just after him anymore? What if helping him had painted a target on her too? The creak of the floorboards made her jump. The shadows in her tiny apartment seemed to shift with every flicker of the streetlight. When her phone buzzed, she nearly screamed. A text from an unknown number. Stop asking questions about Adrian Moore. Lina's breath hitched. Her fingers went cold. She hadn't asked anyone anything. Not the police, not the press. But someone out there thought she had. She tried calling the number back, but it was disconnected. The fear that had been whispering all week now screamed. She double-locked her door, pulled the curtains shut, and sat on the floor, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Her heart wouldn't slow down. She didn't know who these people were, or how they knew her name. All she knew was that the man she'd saved had vanished, but his danger hadn't. It had found her. 3 days passed in a fog of dread. Every footstep outside made her flinch. Every customer who lingered too long made her suspicious. By the 4th day, she stopped opening the shop entirely. She sat behind the counter, lights dimmed, pretending the world outside didn't exist. But the world didn't care. The black car came again. Parked. Waited. Left. Then came the sound of footsteps in the alley one night. Slow, deliberate. A knock at her back door. Lina froze. Another knock. Harder this time. Her instinct screamed, "Don't answer." She grabbed the small kitchen knife from her counter, inching toward the door, heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called. No response. She held her breath. The knocking stopped. Then, a whisper. Lina. Her name. Said so softly she almost thought she imagined it. Lina opened the door. Her grip on the knife tightened. No one knew her name except her neighbors, and they didn't sound like that. The voice was hoarse, low, half-broken. Familiar. The air around her seemed to thin. "Adrian," she whispered. The voice came again, barely audible through the rain that had started to fall. "Please, it's me." She hesitated. Fear warred with disbelief. Then she unlocked the door. He stumbled inside before she could even react. His face was pale, bruised, streaked with dirt. His shirt was ripped, blood darkening the fabric. He looked worse than the night she'd first found him. "Adrian," she gasped, rushing forward. "Oh my God, what happened?" He grabbed her shoulders, his touch urgent, trembling. "You shouldn't have stayed here. They know about you." Who knows?" "Adrian, talk to me." He looked toward the window, eyes sharp despite the pain. "The ones who came after me. They think you helped me escape. They've been watching you." Lina's stomach dropped. The black car, the men. He nodded once. "They're not police. They're hired. Dangerous." Her knees went weak. "Then what do we do?" Adrian swayed, gripping the table for balance. He looked exhausted, haunted. "I can't stay long. I just needed to warn you." She helped him sit, grabbing the first aid kit again. "You're hurt," she said. "You can't just—" "Forget me, Lina," he interrupted, voice sharp. "Go somewhere safe. Leave the city tonight." She froze. "Forget you? After everything?" His expression softened, pain flickering in his eyes. "I never wanted you involved. But they won't stop. I should have never come near you again." Her throat tightened. "Then why did you?" For a moment, the only sound was the rain hitting the windows, steady and relentless. Finally, he whispered, "Because I couldn't not. Because the night you saved me, it didn't end there for me." Something broke inside her. Fear, confusion, longing, all tangled into one breathless silence. But before she could speak, a shadow moved outside the window. Adrian's eyes widened. Get down. The glass shattered. A bullet tore through the curtain, splintering the counter behind her. Lina screamed. Adrian pulled her down, covering her with his body as shards rained around them. Back door, he hissed. Now! She stumbled up, grabbing her keys. He dragged himself to his feet despite the pain, clutching her hand as they ran through the rear exit into the storm. The alley was alive with danger, dark shapes moving between flashes of lightning. Adrian shoved her toward a side path. Run, Lina. Don't look back. But she didn't move. Not without him. Come with me, she cried. He hesitated only a second before following. The two of them sprinted through the maze of wet streets, hearts pounding in unison. Behind them, a car engine roared to life. Tires screeched. Adrian glanced back, then at her. If they catch us, they won't, she said fiercely, though her voice shook. Not tonight. They ducked into an abandoned storage lot, breathless, drenched, trembling. Lina pressed her back to the wall, her chest heaving. Adrian slid down beside her, blood still seeping through his shirt. Tell me what's happening, she demanded. No more lies. He closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at her. Someone close to me betrayed me. Tried to take everything. I found out, and now they want me dead before I can expose them. Expose who? He shook his head. Not yet. The less you know, the safer you are. Lina's voice cracked. Safe? Look at you. Look at us. He reached for her hand, fingers trembling. I'm sorry, Lina. I brought this to your door. But I swear, I'll end it. I'll protect you. Something in his tone, raw, desperate, made her chest tighten. Despite the chaos, despite everything, she believed him. The storm outside began to quiet, but the danger didn't. For Lina, the shadows had finally stepped into the light. And now, there was no turning back. The rain hadn't stopped. It fell in thin, icy needles that cut through the darkness as Lina and Adrian ran, two silhouettes swallowed by the backstreets of a city that no longer felt like home. Their footsteps splashed through puddles, breath fogging the air, hearts pounding in frantic rhythm. Somewhere behind them, engines growled, tires hissed on wet pavement. They're still following us, Lina gasped, her lungs burning. Adrian glanced over his shoulder, jaw tight. Keep moving. He gripped her hand harder, guiding her down a narrow alley barely wide enough for two. The air stank of garbage and diesel, and the flicker of a dying streetlight painted their shadows against the walls like ghosts fleeing the night. When they finally ducked behind a row of dumpsters, Lina's knees nearly gave out. Her pulse roared in her ears. Adrian pressed a hand against his side, blood again. She reached for him instantly. You're hurt, she whispered. I've been worse, he said, forcing a tight smile. She tore a strip from her sleeve and pressed it to his wound. You'll bleed out if we don't stop somewhere. He hesitated, scanning the street before nodding. There's a safe house nearby. Old warehouse by the docks. No one should know about it. No one should, she repeated softly. But someone always does. His gaze met hers, something unreadable flickering there, guilt, fear, maybe gratitude. Then we'll take that risk together. They slipped through the sleeping city like shadows, past shuttered cafes and flickering street signs, through a labyrinth of alleyways that twisted like veins. Every sound made Lina flinch. The rattle of chains, the distant bark of a dog, the sudden slam of a window shutter. Adrian moved with quiet purpose, his every step deliberate. He had the look of someone who'd been hunted before. At last, they reached an abandoned district near the waterfront. The smell of salt and rust filled the air. Adrian pushed open a side door of a decaying warehouse. Inside, the darkness seemed to breathe. Here, he said, leading her in. The place was empty except for old crates, a broken desk, and the faint hum of rain leaking through holes in the roof. Dust danced in the light of a single flickering bulb. Adrian locked the door behind them and leaned against the wall, wincing. Lina turned to face him. You can't keep running like this, she said quietly. You need a doctor, Adrian. His eyes softened at the sound of his name. Doctors ask questions, and questions get people killed. She frowned. Then what do you expect me to do? Pretend none of this is real. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the exhaustion shadowing his face. "I expect you to trust me," he said. "I did," she whispered. "That's how I ended up here." For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The rain outside was the only sound, a steady rhythm that seemed to mirror the racing of her heart. Adrian finally broke the silence. "I should have stayed away," he said, voice rough. "The moment I walked back into your life, I put a target on you." "Then why did you?" she asked. He met her gaze, and for once, the guarded steel in his eyes cracked. "Because I couldn't leave you wondering. Because I owed you the truth." She swallowed hard. "Then tell me." He sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "My father built more enterprises from nothing. But after he died, someone inside the company began selling classified projects, illegal ones. I found proof. I was going to expose them. And then, he didn't need to finish. The ambush, the betrayal, the blood. Someone close to you," she guessed. He nodded once. "My half-brother. He made it look like I was dead so he could take everything." Lina stared at him, the pieces clicking together in terrifying clarity. "And the men chasing us. His men. He doesn't just want the company. He wants silence." Her breath caught. "And now that you came to me, you're part of it," Adrian finished grimly. "I should have never let that happen." Lina took a step closer, anger and fear tangled in her chest. "Don't you dare apologize for me helping you. You were dying." He looked down at her, rain dripping from his hair, voice low. "And you saved me. But if anything happens to you," she cut him off, her tone fierce, "then we make sure nothing does." For the first time, something like hope flickered between them, fragile but real. Hours passed. They made a small fire in a rusted oil drum, its glow painting warm gold across the cold walls. Lina found a first aid kit in one of the crates and cleaned Adrian's wound properly this time. He sat quietly, watching her with an expression that made her heart tighten. "You're not used to people taking care of you, are you?" she murmured, wrapping the bandage. "Not like this," he admitted. "Most people want something from me. And what do you think I want?" He smiled faintly. "I haven't figured that out yet." "Maybe I don't either," she said softly. Their eyes met, and for a long, suspended moment, the storm outside seemed to fade. There was something about being hunted, about facing death side by side, that stripped away everything false. What remained was raw, undeniable. The flicker of the fire lit the edges of his face, the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes darkened when they fell on her lips. Lina looked away first, heart pounding. "You should rest," she whispered. He leaned back, exhaling. "If I sleep, promise you'll wake me if you hear anything." "I promise." But he didn't sleep, not really. Neither did she. The hours stretched thin, the silence broken only by rain and the beating of two hearts caught in the same storm. Just before dawn, a noise shattered the calm, a faint crunch of gravel outside. Adrian's head snapped up. He motioned for her to stay quiet. The sound came again, slow, deliberate. Someone was out there. He grabbed her hand, extinguished the fire, and guided her to the back exit. "We have to move." "Already?" she whispered. "They found us." Her chest tightened with fear. "Ow!" He looked at her, guilt flashing in his eyes. Because no place stays safe for long. They slipped out the back into the misty dawn, the air sharp with salt and danger. The city was waking, but for them, the night wasn't over. It never would be, not until they stopped running. As they disappeared into the labyrinth of streets once more, Lina realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. She wasn't just running from something anymore. She was running with him, and that, somehow, felt even more dangerous. By the time dawn stretched its pale fingers across the horizon, Lina and Adrian had left the docks behind. The rain had stopped, but the streets still shimmered with its memory, puddles like scattered mirrors reflecting the gray sky above. They'd walked for hours in silence. Every sound, a horn in the distance, the hiss of early traffic, made Lina tense. It wasn't until they reached a quiet hill on the city's edge that Adrian finally stopped. The house looked abandoned. Its windows were dusty, the gate crooked, ivy crawling over the cracked walls. But inside, it was unexpectedly clean, bare but safe. Adrian locked the door, checked the blinds, and dropped his bag with a tired exhale. "This used to be one of my father's old properties," he said. "No one knows it exists." Lina looked around. "So this is what safety looks like for billionaires." He gave a humorless smile. "Not anymore." She watched him move, every motion deliberate, weary, carrying a weight she didn't yet understand. The man who stood before her was no longer the wounded stranger from that alley. He was sharper now, but there was something fractured beneath the surface, a man breaking quietly under the burden of secrets. When he finally sat, the silence thickened, the kind of silence that demanded truth. Lina spoke first. "Back in the warehouse, you said your brother did this to you." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Ethan," he said softly, as if the name itself hurt to speak. "He wasn't always like this. We built more enterprises together. Well, at least I thought we did." He leaned back, eyes distant. "My father wanted me to take over after him. Ethan was always the charming one, the socialite. I handled the business, he handled the image. But when father died, something changed. He started talking about expansion, power, partnerships with men I didn't trust." Lina listened quietly, drawn in by the quiet venom in his tone. "One night," he continued, "I discovered contracts that didn't make sense. Money funneling through shell companies, investments in projects I'd never approved. When I traced them back, everything pointed to him, to Ethan." "What kind of projects?" she asked. He hesitated, his eyes flickering with something darker. "Weapons technology, illegal prototypes, things that could destroy more than just reputations." Lina's stomach turned. "So you tried to stop him?" He nodded. "And he tried to stop me." The words hung heavy between them. He rose and walked toward the window, staring at the faint outline of the city below. "I went to confront him. I thought he'd explain, deny it, maybe beg forgiveness. Instead, he smiled and said, 'You should have stayed out of it, brother.'" Lina felt the air leave her chest. "I barely made it out alive," Adrian whispered. "His men caught me outside the building. I was supposed to die that night. That's when I found you," she murmured. He turned then, meeting her gaze. "You saved me, Lina. You had no reason to, but you did." The room fell quiet again, but not empty, heavy with the weight of everything unspoken. Lina stepped closer, her voice low. "You're not angry at him. You're hurt." Adrian's lips twitched, almost into a smile, but it faltered. "You see too much. It's not hard to see what you're trying to hide," she said gently. "You talk about him like you still want to believe he's your brother." He closed his eyes. "He is my brother, and that's the worst part." The silence stretched, punctuated only by the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Then, without thinking, Lina reached for him, just a light touch on his arm. It was enough to steady him, enough to make his breath hitch. "You don't have to keep carrying it alone," she whispered. For a moment, he looked as if he might pull away, but he didn't. "Do you know what it's like," Adrian said slowly, "to look at someone who shares your blood and realize they'd rather see you buried than beaten?" Lina shook her head, her throat tight. "No, but I know what it's like to lose people and wonder if it was your fault." He studied her face, something softening in his eyes. "What did you lose?" "My parents," she said. "I was 16. A car crash. I used to think, if I'd asked them to stay home that night, maybe they'd still be alive." He stared at her for a long moment. "You carry guilt the way I carry silence," he said finally. She smiled sadly. "Maybe that's why we understand each other." Outside, the wind rattled the shutters. The world felt far away. Adrian sat again, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "I kept thinking I could fix it, that if I just exposed the truth, everything would fall into place. But Ethan controls the board, the investors, the narrative. If I show my face now, they'll call me delusional or dead. And if you don't, then he wins. And the world keeps turning, built on his lies." Lina hesitated. "So what will you do?" He looked up at her, eyes burning with quiet determination. "I'll take back what's mine. I just need proof." She folded her arms. "And you plan to do that while half the city's looking for you?" A faint smile tugged at his lips. "I wasn't planning on doing it alone." Lina blinked. "You're not serious." "I am. You're the only person I trust now." Her heart stuttered. "Adrian, I run a flower shop. I sell daisies, and patch up strays. I don't belong in your world. He stood and crossed to her, his voice low but steady. You belonged the moment you didn't walk away. The words landed deep, trembling through her like a confession neither of them meant to make. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. The lies, the danger, the chase. There is only this strange, fragile truth between them. Two souls cracked open by circumstance, finding pieces of themselves in the other. Lina met his eyes. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. Why not? Because I might start believing them. Adrian's gaze softened, something unguarded flickering there. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. The air grew still, the silence charged. The distance between them was a heartbeat, a breath. Then Adrian turned away, breaking the moment. You should rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow we move again. Lina swallowed hard, the echo of his words burning in her chest. She turned toward the couch in the corner, but before she lay down, she said softly, Adrian. He looked back at her. For what it's worth, she said, I don't think you're alone anymore. He didn't reply, but his eyes said enough. That night, Lina couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house made her pulse quicken. Every shadow seemed to whisper danger. But through it all, one thought wouldn't leave her. He wasn't the man the headlines had painted, a ruthless heir or a cold businessman. He was human, broken, bleeding, trying, and somehow, somewhere in the middle of all this madness, she'd started to care. Truly care. The night was restless again, thick with mist, heavy with foreboding. Down by the docks, the air smelled of iron and salt, and the moon hung pale and cold above the water like an unblinking eye. Adrian's hand was firm around Lina's as they moved through the shadows, keeping low between rusting containers. Every sound, footsteps, creaks, the echo of distant sirens, set her nerves on fire. They had been on the run for days, never sleeping twice in the same place. Each hour felt stolen. Each heartbeat borrowed time. Now, the endgame loomed closer than ever. This is the place, Lina whispered. Adrian nodded, his expression carved in stone. Ethan's final shipment leaves tonight. It's proof, records, drives, everything he's been hiding. Once we have it, it's over. Or we are, Lina said quietly. He glanced at her, and despite the danger, there was a faint, fleeting warmth in his eyes. You don't have to be here. I do, she said simply. You're not doing this alone. For a heartbeat, his hand tightened around hers. Then he let go, his mask of composure slipping back into place. They moved closer to the pier, the fog wrapping around them like a shroud. The water slapped softly against the hulls of ships, ropes creaked in the wind, and the faint glow of flashlights danced in the distance. Adrian crouched behind a container, eyes scanning. There, warehouse 4. That's where they'll move it. Lina followed his gaze. Figures in dark coats were unloading crates, their movements sharp and efficient. The faint gleam of weapons under the floodlights confirmed it. These weren't dock workers. Her stomach clenched. There's too many. Adrian's voice was low, urgent. We just need the briefcase. It's on that table, near the truck. He turned to her. Stay here. I'll go. No, she said instantly. We go together. Lina, I've come this far, she whispered fiercely. I'm not watching you walk into hell alone. He looked at her for a long second. Then he nodded. Stay close. They moved like shadows. Step by step, breath by breath. Every sense was alive. The smell of oil and salt, the sound of distant engines, the pulse of adrenaline drumming in their veins. When they reached the edge of the open dock, Adrian waited until the guard's attention turned before slipping forward. Lina followed, heart hammering. He reached the table, hands shaking slightly as he grabbed the briefcase. But then, hey, a shout sliced through the air. A flashlight beam cut across the dock, blinding. Run, Adrian hissed. Gunfire erupted, shattering the silence. The air exploded with sound. The crack of bullets, the hiss of ricochets, the scream of metal. Lina ducked behind a crate, her ears ringing. Adrian pulled her close, shielding her as splinters rained down. They've seen us, she gasped. No kidding, he muttered, reloading his pistol. You said you didn't have a gun. I lied. Now's a great time to admit that. Despite the chaos, her voice made him almost smile. Almost. But then another bullet tore through the air, missing them by inches, and reality came crashing back. We need to move, Adrian said. He grabbed her hand, sprinting toward the far end of the pier. The floodlights swung, chasing them through the maze of crates. Then came the voice, cold, mocking, amplified through a megaphone. Adrian. Lina froze. The voice she had heard only in fragments, on news clips, on whispered phone calls. Ethan, did you really think you could run forever, brother? The tone was smooth, almost amused. You should have stayed dead. Would have been less messy. Adrian stopped, turning toward the source of the voice. Ethan stood on the upper deck of a cargo ship, surrounded by armed men. Even from a distance, the resemblance was uncanny. Same height, same piercing eyes. But where Adrian's gaze carried pain, Ethan's gleamed with cruelty. You don't have to do this, Adrian shouted. End it now before it's too late. Ethan laughed. Too late? It was too late the moment you betrayed me. You betrayed our father, Adrian roared. Ethan's expression hardened. Our father chose you. I just corrected his mistake. And then he raised his hand. Kill him. Chaos erupted. Gunfire ripped through the night. Adrian pulled Lina behind a stack of barrels, bullets sparking around them. He fired back, covering their retreat. Adrian, there's too many. Lina cried. Keep low, he shouted. We're almost at the water. If we reach the pier, we can. But the next sound silenced everything. A gunshot, louder, closer. Lina gasped, stumbling backward. For a second, she didn't understand. Then she felt it. Hot, searing pain blooming through her side. Lina. Adrian caught her before she fell. Blood stained his hands instantly, bright against the pale of her shirt. No, 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 stay with me, he said, voice breaking. Her breathing hitched. I told you, I wasn't letting you go alone. He pressed his hand to the wound, frantic. You shouldn't have done that. Why would you do that? She smiled faintly, tears mingling with rain. Because I finally found something worth saving. Adrian's throat tightened. Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. I'm not, she whispered. But you will be. Promise me. Adrian, promise you'll finish this. He shook his head violently. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Her hand trembled as she touched his face. If you love me, go. The words shattered him. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. The gunfire, the shouts, the storm. It all faded, leaving only her face, pale and beautiful in the flickering light. Then, more gunfire. Closer now. Adrian's jaw clenched. He picked up the briefcase, blood smeared across its handle. I'll come back for you, he said hoarsely. Her smile was weak, but real. You already did. And then she went still. The rage that followed wasn't human. It was raw, primal, a scream that tore from Adrian's chest as he turned on Ethan's men. Bullets sang. Bodies fell. But Adrian barely felt the pain, barely heard the noise. He moved like a man possessed, his only thought echoing in every breath. She saved me. By the time he reached the water's edge, the docks burned behind him, fire reflecting in the waves like a mirror of hell. He dropped to his knees beside Lina's still form, the night swallowing his broken whisper. You weren't supposed to be the one to fall. For the first time in years, Adrian Moore, the billionaire heir, the fugitive, the man the world thought heartless, let himself cry. The storm took his voice, but not his promise. He would end this. For her. For love that had come too late, and yet somehow, right on time. Morning came softly that day, not with thunder or screams, but with the quiet hum of hospital machines and the steady rhythm of life returning. Lina opened her eyes to the smell of antiseptic and the faint light filtering through half-closed blinds. Her body ached, her chest heavy, but there was air in her lungs and warmth at her side. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then she saw him, slumped in the chair beside her bed, head bowed, hands clasped around hers like an anchor. Adrian. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, his once crisp suit wrinkled and torn, a week's worth of exhaustion shadowing his face. But when she stirred, his head snapped up. Lina, her voice was barely a whisper. You came back. He let out a broken laugh, half sob, half relief. I never left. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes, hot and silent. I thought it was over. So did I, he said softly, until you breathed again. She learned the rest in pieces days later when her strength began to return. Ethan was gone, arrested after Adrian released every file, every document, every crime. The empire that once stood on greed now crumbled beneath the weight of truth. Adrian had given up everything. His inheritance, his seat on the board, his fortune. What did you keep? She'd asked. He smiled faintly. You. It should have sounded like a line from a movie. Too grand, too easy, but the way he said it, quiet and certain, left no room for doubt. He meant it. Weeks passed, and when Lina was strong enough to walk again, she returned to what she loved most, her flower shop. The place was still standing, though half its windows were cracked from the chaos that had swept through the city. The air smelled faintly of dust and roses. Adrian stood beside her as she turned the key. You don't have to rebuild this, he said gently. Yes, I do, she replied, stepping inside. This is where it began. He followed her gaze, the worn counter, the vases, the little bell above the door. Ordinary things that had somehow survived an extraordinary storm. She smiled faintly. Funny, isn't it? You were bleeding on my floor the first night we met. Now look at you, alive, clean, and almost smiling. He chuckled. Almost. Lina tilted her head. What will you do now that you are free? Start again, he said, but not the way I used to. The company's gone, and that's fine. I've spent my life building things for profit. I want to build something for people instead. People like me? She teased. Exactly like you. He looked around the shop, then back at her. I want to help you expand this place, not just as a business, as a symbol, a story. Of what? Of what survives. So it began. Months later, the small flower shop on the corner of Willow Street became something more, Lina's haven. A place where people could walk in with grief and leave with hope. Where every bouquet told a story of love, loss, and second chances. Adrian poured his wealth into it, quietly, humbly. No grand openings, no headlines. Just quiet generosity. He funded hospitals, shelters, scholarships, all under her name. You don't need to do that, she told him once. He smiled. I don't do it for you. I do it because of you. The city began to whisper about them, not as the missing billionaire and the poor florist, but as something more human. The man who nearly lost everything found his soul in a woman who asked for nothing. And the woman who once believed she was ordinary became the heartbeat of a legacy that money could never buy. Sometimes, late at night, when the shop was closed and the scent of lilies lingered in the air, they would sit together by the window. Adrian would watch her hands arranging flowers, delicate, certain, and think of how those same hands had once held his bleeding life together. You know, he murmured one evening, you never told me why you risked it all that night. Lina smiled, her eyes soft in the candlelight. Because you looked like someone who'd forgotten what kindness felt like. He reached for her hand. And now, she said, intertwining her fingers with his, you remind me what it feels like to be seen. Seasons changed. The world moved on. But for Adrian and Lina, time no longer felt like something to chase. It was something to cherish. One sunrise, one heartbeat, one bloom at a time. The docks where she was shot were rebuilt into a public garden. At its center stood a statue, two intertwined roses, one crimson and one white, growing from the same stem. The plaque beneath it read, Love is not born from safety. It is proven in sacrifice. Every year, on the anniversary of that night, Adrian brought her there. Not to mourn, but to remember. She would touch the stone, smile faintly, and say, we made it. And he would whisper back, we always will. One quiet morning, as sunlight spilled across the shop and laughter drifted in from the street, a little girl entered holding her mother's hand. She looked around, wide-eyed, and asked, why is this place called Lina's Haven? Lina knelt beside her, smiling. Because once, someone found shelter here when the whole world turned against him. And love grew where fear once lived. The child nodded solemnly, then grinned. That's a good story. Lina's eyes met Adrian's across the room. Yes, she whispered. It is. In the end, their story was never about wealth or danger. It was about redemption, the kind that blooms from ruin. Adrian Moore, once the untouchable billionaire, found peace not in boardrooms, but in a tiny flower shop that smelled like forgiveness. And Lina, once the simple girl who offered kindness to a stranger, discovered that even love born in the darkest night can outlast the dawn. Together, they built something no scandal or secret could destroy. A life, a purpose, a love unbreakable. If you were Lina, standing in the storm, facing danger for love, would you risk your life for someone you barely knew, if your heart told you they were worth saving? Thank you for watching this story to the end. Please click on subscribe, like, and share this video. Click on the screen to watch the next one.